The state calls Richie McGinnis.
Stand, please. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
If you could please make sure to pull that microphone close and speak as loud as you can into it. Thank you. Could you state your name for the record and spell your last name?
Richie McGinnis. Richie McGinnis. RICHIEMCGINNISS.
How are you currently employed?
I'm the video director for the Daily Caller.
What is the Daily Caller?
It's a news website.
How long have you been working for the Daily Caller?
Since May of 2017.
When you say you are the video editor, you said?
Technically chief video director.
Chief video director, what are your responsibilities?
I oversee all of the video content that goes up on the website and all of our video and social media platforms.
Is it fair to say that the Daily Caller is an online news source as opposed to, say, a newspaper or a magazine?
Yeah, there's no print.
Okay. And what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's in Middle Eastern history and Arabic from Georgetown University.
Would you consider yourself a journalist?
I would consider myself somebody who works alongside journalists every day.
Okay. When you say you work alongside them, what are the different roles that you have versus the journalists that you work alongside?
So basically the journalists are the ones who actually post articles. I'm the one who, for example, if a journalist is, on a location, they record a video. I'm the person who helps them get that video onto whatever platform necessary, as well as, packaging the video, distributing it, and, just helping them with any technical issues associated with that.
Who were the founders of the Daily Caller?
Neil Patel and Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson is a Fox News personality, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. And did there come a time where you personally showed an interest in covering some of the protests that are going on around the country?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you tell us about what your focus was in that regard?
Well, at the time that the protests erupted in Memorial Day of 2020, it was very clear from the onset that actually two of our reporters, Jorge and Shelby, who were with me in Kenosha, they were in Washington, D.C. I was actually with my family in New York at the time. But that first weekend, there were, violent riots in Washington, D.C. And after that weekend, it was very evident to me that Shelby and Jorge, being young and brave folks, were able to capture aspects of what was going on that I didn't see elsewhere in the media. And that's when it became clear to me that we could show the public a side of what was happening that the corporate press wasn't keen to show.
You mentioned that these began around Memorial Day of 2020. Was that in part because of what happened to George Floyd in
Correct.
Minneapolis?
Yes, correct.
As far as you personally, you talked about some events in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Were you one of the folks that was covering any of that?
I returned back to Washington. I was in New York with my family. I returned back to Washington on actually Memorial Day, that Monday. And starting on that day, I was on the ground with our reporters.
Other than Washington, D.C., over the summer of 2020, did you go around to other locations to cover these types of events?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We went to Seattle, we went to Portland, we were in Washington, D.C., obviously New York, Kenosha, and, basically it was very clear to us that while, for example, cable news correspondents would go in and say what was going on, and then they'd leave and go back to their hotels, we just hung out in these places for hours and hours on end, and we just used our phones to show the public what was happening.
At these events that you covered in Seattle, Portland, etc., were you ever personally exposed to violence or rioting or arson or anything along those lines?
Yes.
Tell us about some of the experiences that you had at those locations.
Well, Portland, for example, there was a lot of clashing with law enforcement. There was a lot of, I saw incendiary devices thrown at police. And Seattle was a situation where we did see some violent clashes between protesters and counter-protesters. And the same in New York as well. Police breaking up the occupied protests, people clashing with the police. And in fact, in New York, for example, if you're one of these people in there, we're dressed up to look just like everybody else. But if you film one of those violent interactions, then it's only a matter of time if somebody sees you that the crowd will turn on you. And that did happen in New York to Shelby and I.
When the crowd turned on you in New York, did you feel like your personal safety was at risk?
Yes.
Did you actually suffer any sort of injuries as a result of that?
I bear hugged Shelby and I dragged her out, and no, I did not.
Okay.
I have suffered injuries in these zones, but not in that instance.
Okay. I want to move forward to Kenosha. Everybody here is familiar with the shooting of Jacob Blake on Sunday night, August 23rd, 2020. After that, was there a time in which you became interested in coming to Kenosha to cover what was going on here?
Yeah, Shelby and Jorge, who are two of our reporters who I traveled with extensively, implored me to book the trip, and we had lengthy discussions with our editor-in-chief regarding whether or not we should go.
Eventually the decision was made to come here, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Do you remember when it was that you first arrived in Kenosha to begin covering these events?
Yes, it was that Monday.
Do you remember approximately what time of day?
It was the afternoon. I'm not sure. It was before it was dark.
There's been a lot of testimony about what you personally witnessed.
Witnessed many cars being burned. I actually, Shelby recorded an interview with some of the individuals in front of, so there was the big car lot that was burned, but then there was the lot actually where the armed individuals were on the night of the shooting. We actually were in front of that business the night before, and Shelby recorded an interview where those individuals were, there were people who, I I guess the owner of the business had asked people to go out and try to put out the fires. So she recorded an interview with individuals who were using a power washer, and there were other people using like buckets to try to put out fires with the cars.
Mr. McGinnis, we have a map on the wall behind you there. I don't think there's going to be dispute that we've established that on Monday night, the car source location, which is at the northeast corner of 59th and Sheridan Road, had a large number of cars that were destroyed by fire that night. Did you personally witness that?
Yes.
Now, you said you spoke to the owner of the business. That would be the car source business?
I didn't speak to the owner. I spoke to individuals who were out there trying to put out fires, and I believe in Shelby's interview they mentioned that the owner had asked them to come out to put out the fires.
Now, you also mentioned there was a second location, and that would be this car source, which is sort of kitty corner to the southwest, and I know you mentioned there were armed individuals there on Tuesday night, right?
Yes, and that's the same business that we saw people with power washers at the night before.
At this location that I'm highlighting here, which is at the southwest corner of 59th and Sheridan, on Monday night, did you see any armed individuals there?
I did not know.
Were there fires at that location on Monday night?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say you saw people putting out fires with pressure washers, were they putting out fires only at that location on the southwest corner, or were they also trying to put out the fires on the northeast corner?
It was only at that one, and I didn't see anybody trying to put out fires on the other one across the street.
Understood. I think the fires were out of control at that point, so I get that. I'm just trying to pin it down. So, you told us that you witnessed the fires at those two locations on Monday night. Did you witness any other events on Monday night that were noteworthy?
Yes, there were fires everywhere. And Shelby, Jorge, and I recorded a number of those, including multiple businesses that were also burned.
And you recorded that information and then obviously published stories about it on the Daily Caller website. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, yeah.
I want to move to the next night, Tuesday night, August 25th, the night of the shooting. Did you come back to that area to view the events of that night?
Well, the way that it happened was we went to the courthouse to document the demonstrations that were happening in front of the courthouse. And then subsequently, the police pushed the protesters, demonstrators, rioters, whatever you want to call them, away from the courthouse. And that's actually when everybody ended up in that area.
On Tuesday night, based on what you've just described, do you recall approximately when it was that you first got out and were covering things?
We'd been out all day. We were actually, during the day, we were interviewing the owners of the businesses that had been damaged the night before. And so, and also many people from the community in Kenosha came out to help clean up. And so we recorded a bunch of interviews with those folks, as well as getting aerial footage of the damage. And then we went and ate, and then we went back out before sunset as the demonstrators were arriving at the courthouse.
When you said you took video or photos or whatever of people trying to clean up and things like that, did any of that include the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse?
No.
Okay. I know you discussed some of the events that occurred right outside in front of the courthouse. Do you recall approximately what time that was when you were here out in front of this building covering things?
We first got out there probably about 7 p.m.
And how long was it before the event occurred that you described as the police pushing people out of the way?
That was after dark, and it was probably closer to 8:30 or 9.
What did you do then?
Well, I was typically in these kind of situations, the goal is to show both what law enforcement are dealing with and what the protesters, demonstrators, rioters, whatever you want to call them, you want to show both situations. So you want to, I was in the middle of the protesters on one side and the police on the other, and I actually recorded, a variety of things, including things being thrown, bricks being thrown at law enforcement, And then I returned to the hotel because there was no cell service to get Wi-Fi to communicate with folks back in Washington, D.C., as well as post the videos for our team to then redistribute.
What hotel were you staying at?
I forget the name of it. It's literally right there. It's
Is it the Stella?
Stella, correct.
And that's located a little bit off the map here, I think, to the north, but very close to where all this is happening.
Actually, my hotel window was on the third or fourth floor, and it was overlooking that car lot right there.
That's actually the Stella there, isn't it? Yeah. After you returned to the hotel, you've described what you did there. Was there a time when you came back out onto the streets after your time at the hotel?
Yeah, I actually didn't. I didn't even post anything because when I returned to the hotel and got on the internet, I saw armed individuals in front of the same business that we had recorded people trying to put out fires the night prior, and in my mind, that was a continuation of that story. And so I actually dropped what I was doing. I also had Shelby and Jorge who were out there, and once I saw people who were armed, the situation was clearly escalated in my mind in terms of the level of danger, and part of my role was also to, make sure that none of us were harmed. And so I went outside, back outside, and actually I couldn't see that business from the window, but I could see the car lot across the street from it. And basically I just ran down the stairs and went right out there and started communicating with Shelby and Jorge to find out where they were.
The business where you saw the armed people out in front of, was that the Car Source location at the southwest corner of 59th and Sheridan?
Yes.
You mentioned that after seeing them, you felt like the situation was escalating. Why did you feel that way?
Anytime that there are guns, that elevates the level of danger in my mind. Just given that, I've been to, like I said, across the country, many protests in places where people have guns and there's a lot of people in a confined space. These are the kind of situations where everybody's very passionate about why they're out there. So in my mind, that the presence of weapons meant that, I should be on the ground, and Shelby, Jorge, and I should be as close to each other as possible to ensure that, we're all safe.
So did you feel that the presence of guns at that location, did it make you concerned about the safety of your reporters?
Yes.
So you said you ran down the stairs of the hotel, and did you go then, after you left the hotel, did you go directly to that location, that Car Source at 59th and Sheridan? Mm-hmm. Is that yes?
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Now, you've referred to guns. Are you familiar with guns yourself?
I'd say familiar.
One of the guns that we've talked about already in this case is, it's technically a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, but it is an AR-15 type rifle.
Yep.
Are you familiar with that type of rifle?
I've shot it.
Okay. And when you got to that 59th Street Car Source location, did you see individuals who were armed with that type of rifle?
Yes, multiple.
Tell us what you did once you left the Stella and went to that location.
I went down and proceeded straight from the hotel to the Car Source, and basically as I walked up, I saw, I guess there were about 3 on the ground, and I couldn't quite tell how many people were on the roof, but there were like approximately 5 or 6 armed individuals in front of the business. And typically in these situations, especially with armed individuals, I'm just trying to look as unassuming as possible. And so I put my hands up and I said, hey, are any of you guys willing to do an interview about why you're here? Yeah.
Now you've given interviews to various media outlets about your experiences that night, correct?
Yes.
And at one point you described the appearance of these armed individuals at the 59th Street Car Source as menacing. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that. What interview was that?
Sure.
I wouldn't say that that's. I would say menacing is not a bad word to describe it. I would say actually, like I said, it the presence of weapons, just in my mind, elevates the level of risk.
You did an interview shortly after this August 25th incident with someone by the name of Kyle Hooten. Do you know who that is?
Yes, I do.
And in that interview, at one point, you indicated that the group that was armed at 59th Street Car Source appeared menacing.
Okay.
Would you agree with that? We can
Yeah,
play it.
I would agree. I would say that, I mean, I don't know the exact definition of the word menacing. I guess I was using it in a live interview. But I would say that, the level of risk was elevated, is what I would say.
One moment, please.
TVs.
I think they're coming down.
I'll survive.
Maybe she went upstairs to get a cold one out of the refrigerator.
Mr. McGinnis, I have up on the screen a section of the interview that you did with Kyle Hooten. Do you recognize yourself on the screen?
Yeah.
And do you remember giving this interview to Mr. Hooten?
Yes.
Okay. Can we play the excerpt from 7:12 to 7:47, please?
I basically just walked up to them and said, is anybody willing to do an interview? And Kyle was just the most willing. And obviously that's the kind of situation where you have 5, 6 guys armed with some heavy weaponry. Most of them look like they had AR-15 style rifles. And a couple of them were standing up on the rooftop in the darkness. So it was a menacing situation. So my goal was just to get my interview and be as non-threatening as possible and get out of there. So when Kyle volunteered himself, I just wanted to, go with the path of least resistance. And he actually...
Thanks. Okay. Does that help refresh your recollection?
Yeah.
And this was something that you said within a week or two after the incident?
I was in Kenosha when I recorded that interview. That's in the basement of the hotel.
Oh, okay. Good.
That was
Thank you.
like maybe a day or two after.
Now, when I think you said in that interview, when you approached the group, you wanted to interview someone from the group. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
How many members of that group did you interview?
One.
Who is that?
Well, I guess Mr. Gulch was the other one who walked into the interview as I was recording, Mr. Rittenhouse, and then we proceeded up the street after that. So if you would constitute that as part of the interview, then 2. But Mr. Rittenhouse was the only one that I interviewed prior to him arriving.
And I think you said Gulch, but actually, for the record, that's Ryan Balch.
Balch, sorry.
No
Yes.
problem. No problem. Did you ask, and for the record here, the person you interviewed, Kyle Rittenhouse, is seated here at council table with the gray suit and the red shirt, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Did you ask him how old he was?
I believe as I was taking out my phone, generally the procedure is, are you willing to do an interview? Yes. Okay, I'm going to record it. Yes. And I believe that I said something along the lines of how old are you? And I believe the response was something along the lines of, I'm an adult. I actually don't recall because I was doing two things at once, but I just remember the answer being satisfactory enough for me to proceed with the interview.
If the defendant had been honest with you and told you that he was 17, would you have recorded an interview with him?
I would, in those instances, I can record an interview if somebody's a minor, but I need permission from the parents.
Based on what the defendant said to you, whatever the wording was, you had no indication from him that he was 17. Is that fair to say?
I actually told the police the night of that I believe that he was in his mid-20s, but I believe I said exactly that he had a baby face.
We've got the interview that you recorded, and that is exhibit number 16. Can we play that, please?
Obviously you're armed and you're in front of this business we saw burning last night, so what's up?
So people are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle, because I need to protect myself, obviously. But I also have my med kit.
And what about these other folks? Obviously there's some other people who are armed as well.
Their job is to protect me.
Gotcha. And then what about these guys up on the roof?
Their job is to provide overwatch to protect me also.
Gotcha.
They're protecting everybody on the ground. We're protecting each other.
Understood. And
we're running medical, and we're going in and we're getting people.
And what about, are you from the area?
I am from the area.
What brought you out here tonight? You just wanted to provide medical attention?
Provide medical attention to the people that need it. If somebody's injured, like you get hurt, I'm grabbing you.
I'm getting hit with plenty of pepper balls, but
your eyes good?
You know, as long as it's just bruises. Yeah, I got my mask. I'm good.
All right.
And have you encountered any issues yet thus far with law enforcement or anything like that?
We had a group earlier try to kill me and set a fire at the church. So we went to the church and we de-escalated the situation, telling them they need to leave or they will be detained and then later arrested.
This church right over here?
That church right there. And we stomped the fire out all the way down at the school.
Wow. And what do you think it would have been different if the police had to try to stop them from setting the fire?
I feel like there would be a lot more casualties and a lot more people injured. So I think the police are fine where they're at and that let us run the medical because EMS is not coming in. This is considered a red zone to the EMS fire. They are not coming in.
Yeah.
So us citizens, we need to help watch on each other. Me and him are out here running and seeing if people need medical attention.
But speaking of which, we need to go check to see if somebody got hurt again.
All right.
Understood.
If you want to follow us, you're fine.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Good night, Amber. This might be one of theirs.
You are, at this point in the video, walking south along Sheridan behind the defendant and Ryan Balch. Is that right?
Correct.
At that moment, given what you've told us about why you were out there and the coverage you've done with other events around the country, why did you decide at that moment to follow them?
Well, during the interview, he mentioned, what his mission was there, and it seemed to me that they were proceeding to, try to do what he was talking about, and I wanted to record it.
Can we please play exhibit number 17?
So you guys are kind of like medics who are packing.
Yeah,
Right?
basically. Well, he's an EMT, and
Gotcha.
I'm just kind of protecting his ass.
Oh, so you're a certified EMT?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And do you work as an EMT normally?
I got the thing, and I'm a lifeguard normally. I got my ALS and I got my
Gotcha.
The defendant tells you that he is an EMT, is that right?
Yes.
Did he say anything else to you? It's a little hard to hear in the video as to what his qualifications were.
I believe he mentioned something about lifeguard certification.
In your experience at the various events that you've covered, similar to what was going on in Kenosha, Seattle, Portland, etc., have you seen other individuals who proclaim themselves to be medics or EMTs who are armed with AR-15s?
I don't recall any people who, I saw a lot of people who were medics, some of whom were armed, but not with an AR-15 that I recall.
When you saw these other medics who were armed, what sort of things had they armed themselves with?
I just recall specifically in Seattle, a medic armed with a handgun.
Other than that one medic with a handgun, do you recall seeing any other medics in any of the other events that you covered who armed themselves with a gun?
No.
Do you recall seeing any others that armed themselves with an AR-15?
No.
We can continue the video, please.
And I'm former Army infantry, and I got a whole bunch of trauma training.
Well, thank you for your service.
We got you.
Appreciate the service.
Oh, shit. Dude.
There. Do you? It appears Mr. Balch reacts to something at this point in the video. Do you know what that was?
That was I believe it was a brick that was thrown at, a piece of a brick that was thrown at the armored personnel carrier right there.
Did it bounce off towards you guys or something? Do you know?
Yeah, it bounced off in front of us.
Okay. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. There's a guy with a rock. Be careful, right? You have that white fence on the rock there, so be careful.
Hey, friendly, medic, coming through, medical. Medic up through. Does anybody need medical? Anybody need medical? We're running through Roger over here. Anybody need medical? Hey, good. Medical? Doctor, the guys walking around the fire extinguishers are here to put out the fires. They know. Okay, good. They know. He just got shot up. You good? He's all right. Where you shot? I'm not shot. You just said you got shot. No, I didn't.
I thought you got rubber bullet.
Oh no, I just got rubber bullet. Yeah. Oh, it didn't even leave a welt. It just stung. It just fucking stung. I'm fine. I knew.
Little pepper boy never hurt nobody.
It was literally just like,
It's a little spicy, that's all.
It was like, oh shit. That was really annoying.
Yeah, a little salsa.
Could you please not? Does anybody need medical? Does anybody need medical?
I think someone's got some medical weed, I'll tell you that.
Does anybody need medical? Medical!